For more than 40 years, there's a great Kansas album that's left standing behind the two most successful records. One gave Kansas Carry On Wayward Son. The other gave them Dust in the Wind. But maybe the next album didn't fail. Maybe our expectations did. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Dave's Side 1. I'm Dave, your host, who believes an album does not have to repeat a masterpiece to become a favorite. Over here at Art of Listening Records, where every record has a story and every story starts on Side 1. Today we're talking about the Kansas album that may have suffered from having two nearly impossible acts to follow, Monolith. And I think it deserves to stand inside the band's classic period, not outside it. Think about the position Kansas occupied by 1979. Leftoverture had transformed the band's career. Carry On Wayward Son introduced millions of listeners to a group that could combine progressive arrangements, hard rock guitars, keyboards, violin, and enormous vocal harmonies. Then Point of No Return followed, the title track, Portrait, Closet Chronicles, and of course, Dust in the Wind. Then came the live album, Two for the Show, which reinforced the idea that Kansas was operating at the highest level of American progressive rock. So when Monolith appeared, listeners were not simply asking whether Kansas had made another good record. They were asking whether Kansas had made another event. So let's explore as we do with a walk down Dave's memory lane. Monolith is not just another Kansas album in my collection. I bought this record during the week it was released. I found it at Raspberry Records near Cottonwood Mall in Salt Lake City. And when I walked out of that store, I was not thinking about whether the album would eventually be considered underrated. I was thinking that I had the new Kansas record. That mattered. This was a band I had already followed, a band whose albums felt important to me. And buying a new record meant taking it home, opening it, studying the cover, reading the credits, and listening without already knowing what everyone else thought. I would love to hear this album again that way, for the first time. Before the needle even touches the record, Monolith tells you that this may be a different kind of Kansas album. The cover is enormous in its imagination, a Native American figure, a futuristic helmet, broken highways, a landscape that looks ancient and modern at the same time. It suggests history, technology, identity, and collapse. It doesn't look like an album designed around one convenient radio single. It looks like a world. The album begins with On the Other Side. It has a melodic chorus, but the song is not simply chasing an earlier Kansas hit. It feels reflective. It feels like a band looking backward and forward at the same time. Then comes People of the South Wind. It's probably the album's most immediately recognizable song. The keyboard figure gives it momentum. The chorus is concise, and yet it still sounds unmistakably like Kansas. It's accessible without abandoning the band's personality. Angels Have Fallen pushes the album back towards something darker and more dramatic. This is where the record begins proving that it's not merely a collection of shorter songs. The tension, the arrangement, and the changing dynamics still belong to the Kansas that made the earlier classics. Side 2 may be where Monolith makes its strongest case. A Glimpse of Home is one of the tracks that rewards the listener for staying with the record. It has the shifts, instrumental detail, and sense of scale that progressive Kansas fans expect. Away From You brings a different emotional character. It's melodic, direct, and easy to overlook when people discuss only the album's better-known songs. Stay Out of Trouble brings a harder and more compact energy. It reminds us that Kansas was never only one kind of band. Then, Reason to Be closes the album with restraint. Instead of ending with an enormous progressive explosion, the album leaves us in a quieter and more reflective place. That ending fits the record. Monolith does not simply announce itself, it stays with you. Nothing on this album suggests that the musicians had suddenly lost their ability. Phil Ehart remained one of rock's most musical drummers. Dave Hope and Ehart continued giving the complicated arrangements a powerful foundation. Rich Williams supplied the weight. Robbie Steinhardt gave Kansas the violin and a second distinctive voice. Steve Walsh remained capable of moving from forceful rock singing to something much more vulnerable. And Kerry Livgren was still writing music filled with questions, conflict, and spiritual searching. The change was not talent. The change was mood. Maybe listeners wanted another obvious anthem. Maybe they wanted another acoustic song that could cross into every radio format. Maybe they wanted an album that announced its importance immediately. Monolith does not always do that. It asks for time. And that can be difficult for an album arriving after 2 records that seem to reveal their greatness almost instantly. But slower discovery is not the same as weaker music. The easiest way to underestimate Monolith is to place it between Leftoverture and Point of No Return. The better approach is to hear this album by itself. Listen to the sequencing, listen to the mood. Listen to the way the keyboards, guitars, and violin continue working together. Then ask whether this sounds like a band in decline. I do not think it does. Monolith may not be Kansas's best album, and it doesn't need to be. It's a thoughtful, ambitious, and unmistakably Kansas record made during the same classic period as the albums that overshadow it. Maybe Monolith was not disappointing. Maybe our expectations were. So on tonight's Side 1 spin, go pull out your copy of Monolith and play it front to back. And ask yourself, what's the best song on Monolith? On the other side, People of the Southwind, Angels Have Fallen, A Glimpse of Home, Reason to Be? And do you consider Monolith part of Kansas's classic run or the first album after it? And come back and tell me all about it in the comments. Well, that's it for today's Side 1. Thanks for spending a little time with me once again. And please keep that needle in the groove, and we will talk to you tomorrow as we head out to Hawaii for an America album with one extraordinary opening track and a reputation that deserves another look. Talk to you tomorrow.